Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're jumping right in to decode a prophecy that's kind of like a 490-year countdown clock for ancient Israel. It's a puzzle, really, one that has absolutely fascinated scholars for centuries. Daniel's 70 weeks. So let's start the clock. You know that quote from scholar Dr. Wendy Widder? It just says it all, doesn't it? We're about to step into what she calls the dismal swamp of biblical scholarship. And look, I'm not going to lie, it's known for being incredibly complex. But you've got to stick with me on this one, because if you can get your head around this single passage, it unlocks a huge piece of history and theology. It's absolutely worth it. So where does all this even begin? Well, it's not with some, grand vision of the future. It actually starts with a really personal, heartfelt prayer from the prophet Daniel, who's living as an exile way out in Babylon. So Daniel's been poring over the scrolls, specifically the prophecies of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah had foretold this 70-year exile for his people. So Daniel is basically on his knees asking God, is it time? Are we there yet? Are these 70 years finally over? He's just desperately pleading for his people and his city, Jerusalem, to be restored. And this is where things get amazing. While Daniel is literally still in the middle of this prayer, the angel Gabriel just shows up. He tells Daniel that he's there to give him insight and understanding, but the answer Gabriel has? Oh, it is so much bigger than the one Daniel was even asking for. All right, now we get to the core of the revelation itself. This is where Gabriel takes Daniel's 70-year timeline and just blows it up, exponentially. So Gabriel's message is a real mind-bender. He basically tells Daniel, look, you're focused on these 70 years, but God's timeline, it's built on 70 weeks. And with that one phrase, he completely reinterprets Jeremiah's prophecy and reveals this much deeper hidden meaning that no one saw coming. Okay, so what on earth is a week in this context? Well, we're not talking about 7 days like our Monday through Sunday. No, this is a week of years. It's a concept that's actually pulled straight from the book of Leviticus, and it means each week is really a bundle of 7 years. So let's just do the math real quick. 70 of those weeks times 7 years per week, and suddenly we're talking about a massive 490-year prophetic timeline. I mean, this just went way beyond the end of the Babylonian exile. This is now a blueprint for the next half-millennium of history. And what's amazing is before Gabriel even breaks down the timeline, he lays out these 6 incredible goals for this 490-year period. And we're not talking about small fixes here. These are huge, cosmic goals. Things like dealing with sin for good, bringing in God's ultimate justice, and, making everything holy again. The stakes are incredibly high. Okay, so Gabriel doesn't just hand Daniel a simple schedule. He delivers this prophecy kind of like a riddle. And to solve it, we've got to tackle 3 major puzzles that, frankly, have challenged interpreters for centuries. First off, the 490 years are not just one long continuous block of time. Nope. The prophecy actually splits them into 3 very distinct periods. You've got an initial chunk of 49 years, then this long stretch of 434 years, and finally a super intense climactic 7-year period at the very end. So, puzzle number 1. When does the clock actually start? It's like the starting pistol for a race. Gabriel says the countdown begins with the going out of a word to restore and build Jerusalem. Okay, but which word? That's the million-dollar question. Well, scholars are pretty divided on this. Some argue it's talking about Jeremiah's original prophecy. Makes sense. Others point to a specific historical decree, from one of the Persian kings like Cyrus or Artaxerxes, who actually gave the Jews permission to go back and rebuild. And then there's a third view that suggests the word is the actual revelation Gabriel is giving to Daniel right then and there. And the thing is, each choice totally changes the timeline. Next up, we've got a huge debate about how to even read those first 2 blocks of time, the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks. It might seem like a small detail, but trust me, it changes everything. Do you lump them together to get one big 69-week period? Or do you treat them as 2 separate, distinct chunks of time? See, if you read them as one single 69-week unit, it seems to point to just one anointed one. A figure specially chosen by God, like a king or a high priest. But if you read them separately, and there are some clues in the original Hebrew text that suggest you should, then you get 2 different periods, which points to 2 different anointed figures. Big difference.
And here's the crucial part. How you answer that question directly impacts who you think these anointed ones are. The one-figure view? That almost always points to Jesus. But the two-figure view? That identifies the first anointed one with a leader from the return from exile, and the second one with a high priest named Onias III, who was actually murdered back in the 2nd century BC, which kicked off a massive crisis.
Okay, let's pause on all the complex math for a minute because there's this really powerful symbolic meaning hidden inside these numbers. And honestly, this might just be the key that helps unlock the whole thing. Remember that first block of time we talked about, the 7 weeks of years? Well, that adds up to 49 years. And that number, 49, is absolutely not random. It's a huge clue that points directly to a major concept in the Old Testament, something called the Year of Jubilee. So, the Year of Jubilee. You can think of it as the ultimate societal reset button. It was a symbol of total, complete restoration and liberation. All debts were forgiven, slaves were freed, land was returned. It was about returning home after being pushed out. Now, imagine you're Daniel, praying for your people to be restored to their land. This theme would have been incredibly powerful. And that theme of Jubilee, that is the key that unlocks the prophecy's deepest, most fascinating layer. The idea that maybe, just maybe, it's not pointing to just one event in history, but two. Yeah, a lot of scholars now believe this prophecy has what you might call a double horizon. It's working on two levels at once. On one hand, it speaks directly to a very real historical crisis that was on the horizon for the Jewish people. But on the other hand, it also paints a picture, a kind of foreshadowing of a much, much greater, ultimate deliverance to come.
So here's how that plays out. That historical crisis we mentioned, the murder of the high priest Onias III and the horrible desecration of the temple by this tyrant named Antiochus IV, that serves as the first fulfillment. But as one scholar put it, it's like a pale foreshadowing of the ultimate anointed one, Jesus, being cut off in order to achieve those 6 incredible cosmic purposes we talked about at the beginning.
And then it all comes together in the New Testament. When Jesus starts his public ministry, he stands up in the synagogue, reads from the prophet Isaiah, and announces the arrival of the year of the Lord's favor, which is a direct quote about the Great Jubilee. He is, in that moment, basically declaring that he is the fulfillment of this massive 490-year promise of ultimate restoration. So after all that, what's the big takeaway? Look, the goal here isn't just to solve a complex math problem. It's to see that this prophecy might be a key to a much deeper pattern in history itself, this repeating cycle of crisis and deliverance, of exile and jubilee. It suggests that maybe history isn't just random chaos, but that it echoes with purpose, always pointing toward an ultimate restoration. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What patterns might be repeating in our own time?